What's up guys, LeopoldTheBrave here. I'm in a bit of a rut, a bit of a burnout, not sure what to make, but I still want to keep up my weekly schedule, so I figured, why not pick a random topic and ramble about it? Just something easy, I can slap gameplay over this, so you can listen to the video instead of watching it. But today I figured I'd just ramble on about how subjective Versus is, so maybe you can get sort of an idea of how I tier characters in Versus character cards, or how I go about who's gonna win in Versus battle cards. So, back when I first started Versus in my early days of Versus, I used to go to random Versus sites and Versus databases to figure out how strong a character was, or random respect threads, just finding a good starting point to go from, especially for characters that I wasn't too familiar with. But around the time that I quit Versus, I slowly began to realize that the way I was going about it wasn't too reliable anyways. And that's not to say anything bad about these Versus sites, but you gotta remember, no matter how much data they have, they're still written by humans. And humans make mistakes, we miss things, we get skeptical about things that are clear as day. And of course, we're all biased. Bias is unavoidable in Versus. For example, you could say, oh look, this character I like lost. I'm not biased, but they only lost because you're comfortable with the character that they lost to. Otherwise, you wouldn't have done the matchup. But anyways, yes, relying on these random Versus sites isn't the best way to go about it. Sometimes the info can be outdated, like with Captain Underpants. I recently discovered a star level feat for him, but most Versus sites still have him at planet level. So if someone who isn't familiar with Captain Underpants is trying to research him for a matchup, they'll miss that star level stuff and then Captain Underpants will end up losing a matchup that he really shouldn't have. Poor Captain. However, that subjectiveness could come in and say, well, maybe they were just researching the books and not the movie or the show where that star level feat comes from. Then I guess Captain Underpants was supposed to lose that match. And it wouldn't be wrong. When I researched Captain Underpants, I pretty much included all of the official material that was out there, even though the book and the movie both have origin stories that play out differently. Yet when I researched a character like Chef Hatchet, I only included the main Total Drama continuity and nothing from Total Dramarama because it contradicted the main continuity. And yet, despite these being opposite ways to research a character, both are right. It completely depends on the context of the characters, who's researching them, and what their rules are. Also, Total Dramarama is bad and gross and I refuse to watch it, even if Chef somehow has a feat somewhere in it that upgrades the verse several tiers. But yeah, there's no rule or right and wrong on how much you can composite a character. You could include literally everything, or only everything created by the original creators, or only everything in the original format, like if you're researching a game character, only researching stuff that's in games and no movies or TV shows. Or you could be strictly canon only, and even leave out the what-if non-canon stuff that totally could happen, but just hasn't happened. And none of these things are more valid than the other. You could literally pick and choose whichever you want for each character in your matchup, and no one is allowed to tell you whether you're right or wrong. Aside from compositing, another subjective aspect of Versus is how feats are displayed. Some people absolutely refuse to do scaling entirely and only go off of the direct feats of the character they're researching. Meanwhile, others let entire verses get upgraded off a single statement that could be taken out of context. And no matter which way you go with this, you can never really be right or wrong. It all depends on the context of the verse and what you feel like. For example, the direct feats. Let's say you're covering a verse that only uses magic abilities. They don't do physical attacks, they don't punch or kick. So it makes complete sense why you do direct feats only for that verse. And then let's go for statements, allowing even the slightest statement to get by. Most people are visual feats only. They'll only allow a character's stats or a verse's stats to change based on what they see. And that's not right, but it's also not wrong. It's totally okay to be more open with statements, because not every verse has a pair of Dragon Balls that they can use to wish the planet back if it gets blown up. If a villain threatens they can destroy the planet and the heroes act as if they believe it, or if there's in-game text that says it or a narration that says it, then what's the rule that says they're wrong if they get defeated before they get a chance to prove it? Sometimes their own motivations get in the way of their power. If a villain wants to rule Earth, why would they use their planet-busting power to destroy Earth? Take Vegeta and Nappa for example. We both know they can destroy planets, but Nappa got in trouble with Vegeta for destroying a city because he could have destroyed one of the Dragon Balls they went to Earth for. And so, we never see Nappa destroy a planet, yet he's commonly accepted at planet level. It just makes sense, right? So, compositing is subjective, rules are subjective, the types of feats you'll take into account, whether they're visual or statements, is subjective, the way you scale is subjective. And this is the part where I'm going to lose absolutely everyone if what I say is misinterpreted, so please pay close attention. Even calculations are subjective. Now hold it, I'm not saying math is wrong. Math cannot be argued, it's factual. 2 plus 2 is 4, you can't change that. Math is math. I'm not saying math is wrong. Here's what I'm getting at. Let's use a feat for example, a feat that I make out with all the time. Jack destroying the meteor in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. Whenever I'd bring up the feat, I'd always mention the power output being around 20 petatons, or multi-continent levels of power. It's not my calc, it was done by someone else, but it was correct, the math was right. And then a death battle came out where that same feat is calculated to be much, much lower, at around 8 gigatons or island level. And that is also correct. In fact, there's a way you could calculate this feat to get even lower at around mountain level. That's obviously lowballing it to an insane level, but the multi-continental stuff is highballing it to an insane level, and yet both are completely right. This is because there's a bunch of unknown variables in the calculation. How far Jack flew out, how fast he was flying, just how violently this meteor was shattered. The range of calculation results you could get from this feat stretches across 5 different versus tiers, and you could probably calculate it even higher. And while you could easily say something like, well, why not just go with that calc in the middle to balance things out? That 8 gigaton calc used in the death battle was nowhere near the middle. Also, why not go for the highest possible calculation? Whatever happened to looking at characters at their maximum potential? You literally get to decide whether Tekken characters are down on the level of Street Fighter characters or up to the level of Naruto characters based on whichever calculation you wish to choose. And then, in reply to what I just said, I'm probably going to get a response about Akuma shattering meteors in the comics, which are okay for some people to include and not okay for others. But then in response to that, I could bring up Tekken 7 and allow crossover scaling, where Akuma struggled against characters that Jin can beat in his base form. See? Ta-da! Everything in Versus is subjective. You get to pick and choose what's right and wrong, you get to pick and choose what to include and what to leave out. And none of the ways you do it are either correct or incorrect. I've been doing this for almost 10 years, oh my gosh, help me. I've seen it all. So yeah, now you know how it's done. How a character is tiered in Versus character cards, and who wins a matchup in Versus battle cards. I literally just choose whatever I feel like. I just make sure to have a reason for my choices, and that's the secret behind it all. So yeah, Versus is subjective, I'm going bonkers, Leopold the Brave out, see you guys next time. I said that backwards. See you guys next time, Leopold the Brave out.